welcome to Twigg and Jenkins. Governor, welcome to Ohio, my home state.
Look at this backdrop,
I know.
Cleveland.
Cleveland.
A lot of exciting stuff going down here. But,
It is fantastic.
Thanks for having us. Good crowd of folks here and a lot of energy.
You've been barnstorming. I mean, you've been
Barnstorming.
You've been drawing crowds, 2,800 people in Youngstown last night. You got Lorraine up ahead, 100 and some odd people in Zanesville, and all these places that don't often get to see.
Yeah, union
leaders.
halls and things like that. And look, people are asking, what are you doing? I said, I think I'm just responding to what I call the primal scream of folks as they watch this administration trample on human rights, destroy the economy and bring down those democratic institutions that we so cherish, whether it be Social Security or public schools. I'm just out here to try and use what, Vice President Harris gave me a platform, a megaphone, if you will, to lift up, and folks are showing up and they're leading, and it's encouraging to see, because I think the alternative for a lot of folks is, for all of us, doom scrolling in a fetal position at home because what's new today, that's just not the way to go. So I'm just glad to be a part of it, and to be candid with all of you. And this isn't a critique on anybody other than all of us, that this idea that we have to be, play in certain areas and not take our message to every corner, every district, every union hall, every VFW. Great. If we believe that paid family medical leave is a good thing, we should be proud to take that everywhere. And I think for me, especially with a state like Ohio and the tradition and just the sheer scope of it, size, economic impact, we've got to be winning elections here. And that's what I'm trying to, and again, I may be the last guy to give any advice on that, since I'm the last guy who didn't win here.
Oh, come on.
But we didn't win here. But I don't think it's not criticism or ever to say, well, look, how do we win next time? What did we miss?
Absolutely. And I mean, I came of age politically in this state working for Ted Strickland, governor, who was elected in 2006.
Yeah, he was barnstorming with me.
Absolutely.
Out there doing the work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But this state voted for Barack Obama twice.
Yes.
We sent Sherrod Brown to the Senate 3 times. And there's been this massive erosion we had every statewide office. I mean, this was a purple to blue state for years and years.
That's right.
And it's kind of evaporated in a way that it feels like so many places around the country kind of have too. And part of us, I think, that you're doing that's so important is us asking ourselves and being self-reflective of like, did we give up on folks or did they give up on us? And maybe a little bit of both. But we have to turn up and ask.
Yeah, I think we have to. And look, people think of Minnesota as being totally blue. I talked about this. We didn't have the governor's office for, almost 3 decades.
Sure.
That it wasn't the case. We felt like we were in the wilderness. And again, I don't want us to win here because we're Democrats. I want us to win because the policies we're advocating for will improve people's lives in Ohio. Yeah. And I think that's the part that, that's what breaks my heart on this, when knowing that if we didn't win that election, bad things were going to happen to people. And I think that's what you see playing out. So it's great to listen to people. And it's funny how you'd say this at all of these stops, at least somebody says, well, it's good that we're doing, that you're coming around when it's not an election year, that you want a handout or something, I think there was a sense of that. And then once we started to lose these places, and look, it's complicated. It's economics, it's globalization. It's, you can't look at that Lordstown plant that's empty and not realize people are expressing an angst and just an unease about the future that's constantly with them. That's the one thing that, you want physical security, you want financial security. That doesn't mean being rich, but it doesn't mean that, day to day, you're just wondering, what's going to happen. And it feels that way for a lot of folks.
Absolutely. You said something, and I know Brad has to ask a question, but
go.
Yeah, I heard
this
you
is your
say
hometown. Let's go.
It's not my hometown, but my home state. We are in Cleveland. There is a bit of a rivalry between Cleveland and Columbus, but I heard you say something that goes to this point, and I thought it was really profound and really important, which is that the Democratic Party found you. You didn't find the Democratic Party. Like the party came to you with the GI Bill and with things that made material differences in the conditions of your life.
Then for decades, I wasn't engaged in the party. I didn't do things. I'm working. I'm doing what like 99% of people do.
Yeah.
But I kept voting Democrat because I knew exactly where they stood and what they stood for. And that was the tradition in so many of these places. That's no longer true. So I think we all have to ask the question, where did we lose that trust that they knew what we stood for? That we stood for strong unions. We stood for opportunities in public education. We stood for infrastructure projects,
Yep.
and building in communities. And I want to get back and have people do that. No one had to call me or phone bank me or door knock me for years. I was with them because they were with me. And I think a lot of people, and now being an elected official, how do I make sure that they know I've got their back no matter what, and I'm with them? Because when they went into that voting booth again, as I said, or they stayed home and said, what difference does it make? I would argue pretty big difference. Kamala Harris wouldn't have melted down the stock market. Kamala Harris wouldn't illegally snatch people off the streets. Kamala Harris wouldn't get rid of the Department of Education, our critical human rights protections and civil rights protections. So there's a big difference there, which is playing out, but they didn't know that in November.
I love what you just said downstairs. First off, just for the cameras, I'm wearing my Coach Walz.
I do love that shirt. It is.
This is such an underrated
It's
shirt.
good.
Like decades from now, this will be a collector's item.
Not that it has my name on. I think it's underrated because it's got the classic look. That is
Yeah,
a
no, this is
very
like a
classic.
vintage, like high school
does say
football
Coach
shirt. It says
Walz.
Coach Walz.
If you had the crew like a different color around the neck, that's
That would
That'd
be
be
better. It's like a
I
ringer
know,
tee.
so.
I know, love it.
Yeah.
So here's the thing, Coach. I'm going to refer to you as Coach. I
Right.
call my dad Coach as well. I played high school football as well.
Oh, yeah, you know.
I was a very bad option quarterback, which meant that I could only run and not throw.
Oh, yeah,
So
yeah.
I was one of those.
Yeah, I
like
coach
wing
teams,
tee.
though. It's pretty fun, though. You
Really
know?
fun.
Yeah,
They
you get-
put me in on third down.
Yeah,
I can maybe get a few yards,
yeah.
The first thing I want to say is just thank you, because I think that you're being very earnest and modest. What you brought to the ticket was electrifying. I was in that Democratic convention hall. Your
Yeah, it was a
speech
good-
brought me millions of people to tears. We were so hopeful. We were so excited. And so I think we just need to say it, because Democrats are the best at beating up on ourselves.
Yeah.
We really are.
I appreciate you saying that.
And so you ran a perfect vice presidential candidate. You were incredible. The thing that's challenging for me in this moment is that, and you put it so perfectly downstairs, everyone wants to know, who is the Democratic leader?
Yeah.
Who's the Democratic leader? And you put it perfectly, like, the people are,
Yeah.
and
That's not
Yeah.
a flippant statement. It's how this is supposed to work.
Yes.
And then leaders emerge at the time. But this idea of followership and leadership are really intertwined. And when our politics isn't working right, the folks rise up. And now I make the case that while it wasn't totally organic, I think a lot of it was in 2010.
Yeah.
There was and I have my thoughts on why there was a pushback, but it was real. And it was enough of a real, but I think you can trace back where we're at right now and trace back in Ohio. That's where things started to change. So I think it's hard, and I have to push myself on this.
Yeah.
It feels like when you're out and you're in the wilderness that it's impossible. Now, the reason it feels that way is unfortunately, and we're not, both parties aren't the same. Republicans, once they get power, make it harder to get it back because they change voting laws. They gerrymander districts. They make it more difficult. They change the rules. I mean, the party that had Elon Musk spending tens of millions of dollars in Wisconsin is the very same party that passed laws in Iowa that you can't hand out water to people waiting in line to vote. So gaming that system makes it a little harder. But look, the path back is through the people.
Yeah.
And right now, you've got, like on these weekends when people are gathering in, you've got Democratic leaders showing up now because the people are showing up.
Yes.
If you don't go. And you've got Republican leaders not showing up anywhere because they have to answer the hard questions. That's a movement type of thing. That's movement politics. That's populism. It bites both ways, but I think a little progressive Midwestern populism would be a nice pushback to what we're seeing now.
My favorite line you said, you've been making the rounds. I love every interview you've done. But you said, again, back to sports terms, you were saying we were kind of playing prevent defense a little bit, especially towards the end.
Yeah.
And you were saying that we should have gone big.
Yeah. And
What
look,
does that look like? Is that a version going big right now? You coming to Youngstown
yeah, I think
and having 2,800 people show up, right? in red districts, in parts of the state where, again, speaking of your
Yeah,
staff,
all
I never
numbers.
heard of these parts of Ohio
Oh, come
that
on.
you're heading to. It's true.
Not scripted and things. And I want to be clear on this. You know, they try and divide us and trying to say, well, Walz is criticizing. I said, look, I was on the ticket. My job was to get it won.
Yeah.
People had to make decisions. It's not criticizing. I think we ran as hard as we possibly could. And I'm always very clear to make this. And I think America needs to grapple with this.
Yeah.
Kamala Harris was the most qualified person who we've had running for president. I don't think that is debatable. And they still did not choose her because of that. With that being the case, I'm just saying that I think with the new age we're in, with Donald Trump flooding the zone, with we're sitting on a podcast, podcasts all over, these folks flood it. I watch with my young son, young men aren't consuming 60 Minutes. No. They're not consuming the Sunday morning talk shows.
No.
And they're voting. And so how are you getting to them? And I was just making the case that I think, you know, it's hard and it's a big organization. It was a lot of work to be done, not criticizing on it. I just thought, and I watched it with my own eyes, when Kamala Harris got in front of people and I saw her in schools and things like that, she was electrifying.
Yeah.
And I just thought we needed to work as hard as we could to do that. And look, in the age of Donald Trump, you do a lot of interviews. People try and do gotchas and stuff. Just, you know, if you make a mistake, we go back.
Exactly.
And I think leaving a void that Donald Trump will always fill and the right-wing noise machine will always fill. I think we had an incredibly gifted orator and someone who's ready, but I think it was more than that. I watched it in the unscripted moments. I watched Vice President Harris before she was vice president last year, but we were remember, she's the first sitting vice president, went to a Planned Parenthood clinic.
Right.
And she's in Minneapolis.
Right.
On the way back, she was like, I said, you know, we should stop in. And she randomly said, yeah, let's stop in. She pulled over and went to St. Paul Central High School, stopped in to the softball practice, those girls, and was standing there. And it rippled through the crowd all of a sudden, like, oh my God, it's Vice President Harris. And all these young women gathered around her, unscripted, and she's talking about things and this, and you could just see little girls saying, damn, it's the Vice President of the United States.
So
and she's
cool.
And my point on that is I wanted to see a lot of that.
More of
now,
that.
Look, decisions have to be made. Maybe everybody said, well, you think we're going to go to every high school in America and win? You know, we can't do that. But I felt like we had to do something and see it. Because look, this is what they do. They will try and define you. And they were trying to define Kamala Harris in something that
and
right
you too.
does.
They're trying to define
course.
you.
course.
My dad is a veteran, and the way that they try to swift boat you.
Yes.
24 years of military service.
Yes. Totally untrue. And
it's totally untrue, and that's the challenge too.
But if you don't respond to it,
exactly,
that's out there. So that was and I know they try and get this. This is not you play games and everything. You do the best you can. You work hard at it. If it doesn't work, it's not critiquing and being critical. It's going back and saying, because someone asked, they said, would you have done anything different in this campaign? I would have won. We would have won. That's the first thing. So
good answer.
If you extrapolate from that point, but you didn't, okay, what do you think would have done it? And I don't think I think you have to, it can't just be on the voters.
Yes.
Can't just be on the voters.
And as a former campaign staffer, it's like I've been on losing campaigns, and you have to go back and look at what you did and what you would have do differently, just like you would any job or any kind of.
I do think it's important to acknowledge the quality of Vice President Harris and what was expected of her in 100 days had never been asked before.
Never been asked of anybody.
Never been asked before. And, to do that work, and, look, it's a zero-sum proposition. If you lose by one vote, you lose.
Yeah.
But we were in the fight.
Yes.
And had that. So I'm not saying, look, the campaign did all this wrong or whatever, or that we have to retool everything. But I do think the thing where it's not like a focus group and bringing things in. These areas of Ohio should be voting for us on the policies we're putting out. And we got to figure out how to make that happen.
Well, so two questions I have. It's like one, I think you're doing it, right? There's a saying that I was raised, that I heard growing up, which is you dig the well before you're thirsty, right?
Yes.
And I think when you come
That's a good one.
when you come to places, when you're not immediately asking for a transaction of someone's vote, you can have an opportunity to have a different type of conversation, whether that's on a podcast,
And
whether
you can
that's
learn
in
from them.
Zanesville
This
or
is the
Martins
testing
Ferry.
ground to hear from people. What do they need?
Absolutely. And I think that's something that Donald Trump did really well, was campaigning for 365 days a year, showing up not leaving early, not trying to fit.
We
in
should be
50
doing that
things.
without assaulting police officers in the United States Capitol like he did. I would argue. So we can do
100%.
ours.
100%.
And we had tons of people show up on April 5th, and not a single police officer was assaulted. Isn't that amazing?
Crazy.
Yeah,
Crazy how that worked. Yeah.
So, but I am 100% agreement with you that it starts now, and this is the world we are. I think people. My take is people are weary with this. I wish we had 90-day campaigns always, but that was laws around it. But that's not the case. I think the reason to be encouraged is nearly 3,000 people in Youngstown.
Yes.
You know what Bernie Sanders and AOC had 30,000 people.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. And I think Cory Booker energized literally hundreds of millions watching across there. So I think Gavin Newsom's doing a podcast. I think folks are out there.
I have a lot of thoughts on that podcast, Governor. You were great. You were great on that podcast, but I love that you pushed back on this idea that Bannon and Charlie Kirk have all the answers, right? Like, I love that you reminded him that these are people who have every single day are trying to divide us.
Yeah.
And so you can have them on, cool, but let's just remember who we are actually fighting for.
Yeah.
So I appreciated you pushing
No,
back.
and
on.
I get it. And then look, Gavin's a friend of mine. He's great. I not criticize. I'm of the belief right now that what Democrats or progressives or folks who don't think we should have an authoritarian government, that everybody needs to be on the playing field right now.
Of course.
Yeah.
Be who you are. And the thing I'm kind of cautioning folks at, stay in the moment.
Yep.
Dig the well.
Dig the well before you're thirsty.
I'll give you credit for that, and then I'm going to use that.
Sorry, we got it on tape. So.
and you better not have an ulterior motive in this other than getting us back and helping. And that's why I'm really excited about like the party here of like reestablishing, because I'm a big believer you have to have infrastructure, and you can't just have it in battleground states. You have to have it everywhere.
Are there tactics that you think that we're not employing enough? Like you just named a bunch of leaders who are getting on the road, doing the podcasts.
Yeah.
Like, but the Republicans are so ruthless, and they're just, we will not do a handful of things that they do, whether it's restricting voting rights or not. But like, what can we be doing more of, whether we're electeds or just people who are engaged?
I think we're better at the retail politics than them, because I think they take their talking points and they stick to it, and it's not nearly as organic. I think I think we're timid to go and just stop and go into a place and, you know, and I'll have people come up and say, I didn't vote for you, you know, and that's, I appreciate that. I appreciate you voted. That's what I care about. You know, I wish I could have got your vote into this or whatever. I'm not certain that in this age of media and its podcasts, now obviously Kamala Harris can't shake hands with 330 million Americans, but there's a whole bunch of us out there that we need to flood the zone. I think we need to go into these areas, get on the ground so they see us as real people, because if you don't, they characterize us. And that's why people like Sherrod Brown do better, because Sherrod is Sherrod.
Yes.
Yeah.
All the rest of us are some theoretical thing that they beat on or whatever. We've got to bring the humanity to it, and they've got to see the associations with who we are broader. So,
I'm going to bring up something that's controversial, Governor, and you know your team could cut it. So as I said before, huge football fan.
Yeah.
Also, I'm a man, so I love the video games. I love Madden. I love all the things.
Yep.
When you decided to go on Madden, you're going to do live stream with AOC.
Oh, yeah.
And do the Madden thing.
Yeah.
I was like, this is great.
Yeah.
We got my favorite governor in America. They're going to play Madden. And here's the thing. The attacks that they were already waging against you, we already talked about swift boating you.
Yeah.
They're calling you tampon this, tampon that. They're making you
Imagine that we have feminine hygiene projects in bathrooms in school like toilet paper. We don't make you bring your toilet paper. So, I mean,
But here's the thing, Governor. The reason why they are attacking you is because they saw you as a huge threat.
yeah.
They knew that you are authentically what they weren't.
Yeah.
You are authentically a cool guy who's a football coach from the Midwest, who is just who you are, unapologetically who you are. But here's the thing. I was so fired up about that stream.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know, was it a tweet? Someone tweeted out, like, we drew up this pick six, and then all of my friends.
I don't know what that was about.
What was
either.
that?
I never, like on the campaign, I never saw a lot of this
Yeah,
stuff.
so-
I didn't know. I think what they said is that I threw one, AOC picked it, and I'm like, oh, shoot, a pick six or something. I don't know what, did they hear me wrong or what was it?
Yeah, so the tweet was essentially like, I drew up a pick six, and then
No.
I know.
Threw a pick six.
It was drew up a pick six.
That's what they said? Is that what I said?
Yes. No,
Oh,
that's
I
what
might
the
have
tweet
misspoken.
said. You
I'm
didn't say
supposed
it. You didn't say it.
Yeah.
No, this is what the tweet said.
Oh, yeah.
So that goes viral. So everyone is saying this man has never coached football before because your social media director put out a tweet. Now all of a sudden people are questioning whether you
So scarred by this.
whether you even know how to coach football. And in my head, I'm like, well, first off, this is so ridiculous. Secondly, I mean, you can sort of drop a pick. If there's like a cover zero, if you're flooding the zone, do you know what I mean? And
They
your
know how
corners are coming up.
They know how on a congressional campaign. How do they think I had the phone in my hand?
They
People
thought
must
you
have.
were tweeting it
People
yourself.
must have. People must have thought that like I took
that's
over
so
your because
sweet.
I don't even know what we're talking about.
No, I missed all this. Somebody brought it up, but look, it's that that goes on everything. I was out pheasant hunting or whatever, and I shoot a Beretta A400, and on the Beretta A400, when you're unloading something, it'll slip behind the thing.
Yeah.
So I was talking to the guy and just trying. Oh, he doesn't know how to use the gun. I guarantee you, anybody who was on there, I would outshoot them, and I've shot more than them any time. But it's what they
100%.
do, and they put it out there.
And so that was front page news.
How do you campaign? The pick six thing was?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't
And
know
it
that.
was in every, all of the sports, that sort of sports media, like Barstool, all these places.
So it
picked
didn't
up.
matter. You had all these people who played
Didn't
football
matter.
for me, won a
So
state
you played
championship.
that. You had your team up there on stage with you, which was so beautiful, right? You've dedicated your life to coaching, inspiring young men.
It is
to
one
be
thing
the
I'm
best
pretty
they
good
can
at. I
be.
was a good defensive.
And here is one tweet. They take one tweet out of context, and
yeah, this is actually there's
This is
actually
the
a
thing.
broader. There's actually a broader thing here because it does get that how one outspoken. Look, I had a 24-year career. My records have all been public for whatever.
Yep.
We were right after a school shooting talking about AR-15s or whatever, and I misspoke and said in and of or something, a different
Right.
word. Oh, that's stolen valor. What are you talking about? I never said I did any of this. I don't know in America how you combat some of that. Do you throw everything back at it and bring a piece at it? Me personally, I'm like, well, I know who I am and I don't do these things or whatever. I wonder how much you're right. I mean, how much of the impact comes out of things like that?
Well, it was so infuriating to me because like when I was at the White House, I got President Obama to go on Between Two Ferns, which is this very weird.
I remember that
Do you
one.
remember that?
I remember
That
it
was
well.
all
That
Brad.
was me. That was my whole brainchild. Because healthcare.gov, no one was going to the website.
Did you get crap about that one?
No, it was a wild success.
Wild
because
success.
No one was
Wait.
doing stuff like that.
Well, you got to be fair, for context, Brad had been proposing it,
months.
getting laughed out of the room.
no
Everyone was
one
like,
wanted
"This
to
is a
do it."
terrible
Well,
idea."
now I might have to
And
go
then-
back. I didn't track this thing with the. You think it's that big or is it in the bubble?
I think this
Folks who
is
do it.
Brad's bubble.
This is my
I don't know
bubble.
what this is.
Yeah, see.
I don't know. Sorry,
Well,
not to be
this is my
dismissive.
bubble.
But I think it brings us
Sports
to the bigger
bubble.
thing of
It's
what I
the
was
male
saying.
sports bubble.
We do have to do that.
Which is a
But I
really
think
important
it's
bubble.
the timidness. What I
Yeah.
worry about is if that becomes an issue and people are worried about that you misspeak. And I said, I threw a pick six on this thing. Like,
Yeah.
of course I know it, and the people who are around me know it. Then they become afraid to do that.
Well,
You know
that
what I
was my
mean?
question for you, which is, in my head, I'm like, all right, that was some BS.
Yeah.
Let's get Governor Walz on the Bill Simmons podcast. Let's get him on
I
Stephen
did
A.
go on
Smith.
some of these
Let's
where we
go
drew
on-
up things. I went to USC.
Okay.
And was
I remember
on the field
that.
down there
Cool.
and some of the things. So, well, look, it begs the bigger problem about how do you fill these different
Yes.
channels, these different media channels. How, again, no matter what you do, they're going to, look, 24 years in, they're going to attack that.
Yep.
School teacher, fake videos about kids,
Yep.
stuff like that. Coach football, champion on this, ding you on this stuff or whatever. It's what they're going to do. Is that a bigger societal issue on misinformation? Well, I'm worried about misinformation because in COVID, I found out what it does. How do we combat that? Certainly not, tearing them down the same way,
No.
but we do have to get out there and be visible.
It's talking to this one, Carrie Twigg, right? Like she has a
Yeah,
not to promote you, but I think that this is it.
you're
right?
supposed to. It's your show. You can.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna promote
Oh,
it.
yeah.
No, but it's at the moment we were so frustrated because again, they have so much supply. When we talk about like supply and demand,
Yeah.
there's so much,
Does that motivate you guys to try and put more supply?
Yes.
I mean, right now it's like the average American is watching between 4 and 6 hours of video content a day.
I know I'm one of them now. During the campaign they had me off, and I was so healthy, and my mental state was so good. Now, like I said, now I'm
Now
doomed.
Brad's reminding you of all the
I'm
hell
like,
that broke
damn
loose.
it!
Yeah.
Keep my crazy taxi play, and everything else.
you
so.
know, but the part of the problem that we have is like Democrats, and this is an oversimplification, but Democrats, generally speaking, we made a bet on short form content in the form of TikToks and so on, sort of underestimating how much supply you have to be able to produce in order to fill 6 to 8 hours of video content today.
Yeah.
Part of the reason why Joe Rogan and these guys are so successful is the length of their episodes.
Yes.
So they're going on for 4 or 6 hours. People want to fill their time with video
Are there
content.
people watching him for like 4 hours
Yeah.
at a time?
Trump went on Rogan for 2.5 hours.
2.5 hour long interview. And so
Didn't he have work to do or anything?
well, clearly
That
not.
was work.
But it really speaks to like, and that's where their power comes. Think about who you spend 3 hours a week with.
Yeah.
Right? Like those are people that are close to you. Those are your friends. Those are your family. That's your favorite coworker. And so when that guy then tells you to support this guy, you're like, oh, well, my buddy who I spend all this time with over the course of the year told me that he likes that guy, so I'm going to like that guy too.
Yeah.
And so Democrats,
Do you think progressive voters would spend that much time together, or is it
I
different?
think
Is there
so.
a
Well, we
different
haven't built
behavior?
it.
we just haven't built the supply
You
yet.
build it, they'll come.
We think so. I mean, we started this in July, kind of as a lark.
We just started Zooming with each other, and then we've built already this parasocial community. We have 3 million streams just from us Zooming.
Yeah.
And so now we're building it to, we had Senator Kim on last week, we have the governor on right now. But this is the thing, Governor, like we need to
So
get
should
out of
people
our
like
own
me
way.
be going from one to the other
Yes.
to the other to the other?
I mean,
the time.
honestly, in the same way that we expect elected officials to like have call time every week,
Yeah.
like people should be doing
Yeah,
podcast
I do.
time. You should
Yeah.
have a couple hours of podcast time basically every week. Sorry,
And
team.
it's the,
but
it's not the ones, like I said, I was
Yeah.
talking about my son, was probably only a 7th grader at the time, came in with a very nice, sophisticated discussion with me about why the minimum wage was bad because he'd listened to Rogan. Which, you know, and I will give Joe Rogan this, that it was a really good conversation I had with him, which
Right.
is a fair conversation to
Sure.
have. You know, this was economic. This wasn't, you know, some nonsense or smear or anything like that. It was an economic conversation that is a fair one to have.
Yeah.
And he was on that. And I think the entertainment value, don't underestimate. I'm really grappling with this about why does Donald Trump bring people? What do we do? Do people want to be, is the Democratic brand cool? Do they want to be a part of it? Are they doing, you know?
not really at the moment.
Right, and then the polling
Not yet.
shows that.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
But look, then if you try too hard, it looks buffoonish. It looks like you're over trying. I'm certainly
Totally.
not advocating for a candidate to be like Donald Trump, but I do think we need to. And I would say this, going on those sports talk shows is a space that I feel Donald Trump's going, he doesn't know football, but he's going to the Super Bowl. He doesn't know NASCAR, he's going to that. I think he does know, you know, the Dana White stuff and the WWE.
Oh yeah,
I
he's
think
been in
he
that
knows-
world for a long
He's
time.
been in that world, I'll give him that. But he doesn't know the NBA, he doesn't know hockey and things like that, but he's going up and he's showing up
Yes.
in those places. I've always just gone because I like him, but that's your whole thing. They want to attack you and show you that you're not real in this.
It's supply. And
You
we
think
can give
Donald
you,
Trump is, like
I
in
know.
shape and sporty and
No.
everything?
I
So,
know.
he doesn't
I know.
follow any of this stuff.
So look, I think maybe folks are getting that. I think that's
Yeah.
what you're starting to see, that we have to get more content out there. We have to believe, and then we got to get their trust back. I think, you know, and I'm going to go to this. When we have power, we need to pass things that make their life better.
I know.
Yes.
This part of Ohio is, look, they said it. Okay, so Lordstown goes, but you know, you had Democratic and Republican presidents who
right.
didn't get anything done on it.
That's right.
Yeah.
So if it comes down to flipping the coin, you're both terrible on economics, but I don't like your social issues. So
Yeah.
and that's where
Yep.
so they're not voting on labor values, they're voting on the social issues.
Absolutely. And who seems the most honest, right? Like
Yeah.
Donald Trump has never hidden the fact that he's basically incompetent, right? Like
Yeah.
he just has not run away from that. He's saying in
And he
spite
tells
of
me he's
all
gonna
of
fight
that.
for him. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I think this thing, and I think we have to don't mistake our kindness for weakness.
Yeah.
And you can be compassionate and also beat the crap out of people when they need to have the crap beat out of them. I'm not quite sure that we've navigated that. So.
One of the things I think we need to do in this moment is like really redirect people's attention to their states. And so
Yes.
you as a governors play such a unique role, huge role. Can you just talk to us a little bit about like folks in their state? It's like, yes, pay attention to, I guess, the Hill if you want, but who's your governor? Who's your
Yeah.
rep? What's happening in your town?
Yeah.
States are such important incubators for what happens on the national
Yeah.
level.
Well, and the irony is too, is Republicans always believe that states,
Absolutely.
states' rights and all that until they don't want states' rights. But look, it matters. There's a line up in, between Fargo, North Dakota, and Moorhead, Minnesota, and there's a river, Red River up there, and you could probably hit a golf ball from it. But a year or so ago, after Dobbs and everything starts to happen, the clinic for women's reproductive health moved about 100 meters across the river because they're in Minnesota. So if you're on the Minnesota side, you make your own healthcare decisions. You're protected by it. Your physician makes those decisions. You're not there. You're across that river, you got paid family and medical leave. Got to cross that river, you love and marry who you want to, and it's none of my business what you're doing in there. When it's that graphic and telling people, this is what happens when you're in states, and we have now that differentiation is so great that it truly matters. Now, I agree with you. I think focus on the governors. That's why I was the chairman of the Democratic Governors Association. And I'm making this prediction: when we win back the governorship in Virginia this fall, they're in an off year. It is going to send a shock wave that followed with this win in Wisconsin. That now all of a sudden, if you're on the edge and in not a real strong district, you might think twice. Now, do I think they'll jump? No, because I think their loyalty to Donald Trump is bigger than their loyalty to their constituents, but it will also make it very difficult and you'll probably lose your job. That's why the focus on the states, the focus on the governors, the focus on the state house, and it's why I'm out here in Ohio, help them. When we're not here and we're not helping, very difficult for local school board members to get elected, very difficult for the legislature to get elected. And so I do think that's where we focus. And then when you start to build back that power, because look, we could really use your electoral votes here. That would have really helped. And we're going to have to recognize this. In 2030, we're going to have another census. The blue wall that didn't hold this time, the blue wall votes are going to end up in Texas. And we need to win Texas. And we need to, and I would say this, there's folks that could really use health care and reproductive rights in Montana. We should maybe win in Montana and elsewhere. So.
You had a great line at the rally that we just saw, which was, Republicans right now are afraid of Trump, but that's changing.
Yes.
They're going to start being afraid of the people.
They are.
And
that's the firewall.
And what you're doing, there was an incredible town hall you had, I think it was a week ago, where this young man came up and talked about what it means to attend a Title I school.
Aiden. In Fort Bend.
It was so beautiful.
Yeah.
And what I love what you're doing and your team's doing is you're doing these town halls, but you're centering the people coming to the town halls.
Yes.
We're listening because those are the best messengers.
Yeah, I'm glad you picked up on that.
You said something beautiful to the room, which is, again, something that Democrats don't do, where you said, look, we as Democrats, we've not done a very good job of explaining what the hell the Department of Education does.
No one knows.
No one knows. But now people do. And
because Aiden's life is impacted by it.
Exactly.
And he was worried about his classmates. You know, I appreciate that. And I think that's what we talked about this, that Vice President Harris gave me a megaphone, and I want to hand it to the people.
Yeah.
So for that moment, Aiden had the megaphone.
Yes.
National press was watching, and he articulated where the people are at. I think that's where, in that case, I said, Aiden probably did more good than many of us did over the years of saying why we shouldn't get rid of the Department of Education. That's good. That's people leading.
Yes.
So.
And I think I was so moved when you were selected to be the vice presidential nominee. And you know, my sister's here. We're daughter of a social worker. Our mom's a social worker.
Yeah.
And just universal school lunch,
huge
breakfast and lunch. If we can't feed kids who are trying to learn in school, I don't know what we're doing.
That's right.
It's so fundamental. It's so
and why
basic.
would we they'll try and define it of what that is. What that is good policy.
Yeah.
What that is both not only moral good, it's also economic good, because those students learn more, they have less truancy, they get better grades, things go on the better, it's just that trickle of things. And I would mention in the morning, that you're fighting here to defund your schools or whatever. You should be fighting to feed them, because I'll tell you, you defund these schools, you do vouchers, you send it out, you get a choice, and it's almost as simple as this. You can buy school buses or you can buy prison buses. You defund on the front end, you're going to be buying the buses. I'm telling you, that's just the way it goes. And I think we need to connect that to people, that there's both a moral imperative, there's a personal imperative for you, but there's also the societal imperative that will impact you. It's better to have your neighbors be well educated and healthy and paying taxes than it is to put them in a situation where they can't do that.
I feel like one of the things that we did really well in 2024 was reclaiming so many things that Democrats feel like they'd gotten edged out of, whether it was like patriotism
Yes.
or
Yeah.
masculinity in a particular way.
Well, they're still working that one, aren't they?
Absolutely. But I think you just touched on the third, which is morality. Like we
Yes.
have been, Democrats have over the course of the last 15 years gotten edged out of having but it is a moral decision whether or not your government demonstrates compassion
Yeah.
Yes.
for
A budget
all
is a
of the
fiscal
society.
document and a moral document.
Yes.
And they go one and the same. And I think it's because they've used the language of it, especially around, just be candid around it, around Christianity.
Yeah.
And claim that, which I'm fine. I've always said this, and I still believe this. We don't talk a lot about it because I don't believe that you need your elected officials to give you a sermon, but I do think you should expect them to live one. And I think that's where we get the disconnect on some. We need to make sure that showing, it's not like look at my moral life or whatever, but I find it interesting that, getting attacked when I've been married to my wife for 31 years, happily so or whatever, and we hear them talk about their family values or whatever. We should, and
Yeah.
my thing
Afraid
is,
to, though.
But I feel like we've lost the muscle of
We've afraid to call
being
out just the
comfortable.
hypocrisy. I mean, let's just be real. We've afraid to call out that 80% of white evangelicals voted for Donald Trump.
yeah.
Someone who is literally defunding the poor. Like, what do we actually read in the gospel?
Yeah. Well, we should.
Which
We
party
shouldn't be afraid.
aligns
We
with
shouldn't
what is
be
in the
afraid to
gospel?
say it a little bit. And I talked
Yeah.
about that. It's just not really in our nature, but we probably need to do a little better job of that. Not because I think I believe we have a secular government and always should, but
Right.
I think our decisions are being driven by our morality,
Yes.
and and that is it does the Christian morality, an Islamic morality,
Yes.
a Buddhist morality. But it's interesting is the great religions of the world always do all come back to maybe you should spend a little time taking care of your neighbor.
Yeah.
Maybe you should be a little, they spend a lot of time on that and not a lot of time on the stuff they're talking about.
Not a lot of time on tax cuts for billionaires.
No,
for
they don't. They
Nazarenes,
don't talk much on capital gains tax
Yeah.
in the New Testament. So,
I didn't find that verse in the Bible.
well, look, I think it's not about the soul searching, the hand wringing, and the focus group type of thing. It's about being candid of where we're at, knowing that we need to win these elections to improve people's lives, and we can't give up on it. And we should go out and listen to what people are saying, get it done.
Where are you heading next? So you've been in Ohio. Go for people who have not been paying attention.
Yeah.
Where have you been?
Been in
And-
Iowa, been in Nebraska, been in Minnesota, been in Texas, now across to Ohio, up a little bit. Going home for a little while. I usually do this on the weekends, and then it's what I've been doing, and then I go home and do my day job. We just sent out word and said, if you want us, if you think it'll help you, we'd try and come if you would. So I think we're just kind of waiting to see.
You're filling a void right now because, as you mentioned downstairs, Republican members are afraid of town halls
They are.
because they know they're going to get beat up.
They are.
So you're filling this void of going to red districts, hearing directly from the people. I'm just going to say it, Governor. Let's just get in here. Midterms are right around the corner,
Yeah.
but the next presidential is right around the corner as well.
Yeah.
I'm one of your biggest fans.
Yeah.
How do you feel about this moment? I don't think that we have a deep bench. I think Democrats keep saying we have a deep bench. I don't think that we do. You've proved yourself as someone who not only resonated with so many people, but you're ready for the job, in my humble opinion.
Well, I appreciate it.
What are you thinking? Let's get down to it. you
Well,
know?
my thing is, I think I'm doing I work on it, mindfulness in normal times, but living in the moment. I think this is a time for all hands on deck.
Let's
I've
go.
said it.
Governor, I'm taking that as I'm running. Let's go. Let's do it. No
we're
kidding.
setting the groundwork. I've told people, I think if people are planning for 28, they're going to miss the moment.
True.
They're going to live out of this. I have said this, that I think we need everyone. I do think, I think I disagree with you on this. I do think we have a deeper bench, and I think they're out there. I think there's attorney
I
generals.
agree with the governor.
There's attorney generals out there fighting.
We love carrying.
There's attorney
the
generals out there
Democratic
fighting.
Party.
I'm biased towards the governors. I will tell you that. But I think there's a lot of folks out there. I think we haven't seen some of them yet. And I think you're tested under fire. And I think governors are good, a lot of them, because, like you went through COVID, and I went through George Floyd and tried to deal with, racial inequalities, that you do gain some muscle in that. But I think it's going to be, by that time, it'll be a long ways down the road. It will need to have the person of the moment, and that will show itself. And I think having us all in the field right now, we can't. I don't think we have anybody that competes with Donald Trump for space on this. But I think you start lining up a few of these people. You start lining up a Cory Booker next to an AOC, next to a Chris Murphy, next to, whoever it is.
Next to a Tim Walz in Ohio. Let's go.
Well, yeah, you start lining them up and everybody's going down these lanes. That starts to feel a lot. At the same time, this guy's, crashing the global economy and, golfing in his senior tournament in, Florida, whatever he's doing.
You notice how we didn't bring him up once.
I know.
Because this guy... My parents are Trump voters.
Yeah.
So it gets tricky when I go home.
Do you think they'll move off it?
I think that they're deeply disappointed with a number of things, which is promise them cost of living would go down, promise them egg costs would go down, promise them that their 401ks wouldn't be obliterated in 3 days. But here's the thing that they still resonate with, which is they still think he fights for them.
Yeah.
They still think
that's a very important point.
Even when he messes up everything up, even though he's corrupt, even though he's brazen, they give him...
Far be it from me to question him on that. That's their reality. Perceived reality is reality.
They just believe it.
Why do they not believe we're fighting for him?
Because we're not doing what you're doing, which is just showing
So
up.
Go fight for him.
You got to show up.
I think that's right now. I get asked about this. What do you know right now? And I said, not much, other than I think if you're a Democratic elected official, the one big choice you right now, are you going to fight this with all you got, or are you just going to sit back and see what happens? That's what I'm talking about, being mindful in the moment.
Yeah, we got to get caught trying.
Yeah, I may be overreacting, but
You're not.
I said it down there. I'm going to err on the side of that this is more serious than you could ever imagine.
The biggest mistake Democrats made, Senator Schumer, and I know you got to leave, but Senator Schumer caving in that way. I don't know your thoughts on it, but that is not called fighting. That's not fighting.
Look, I understand why he did it and the pain that it brings, because he's a responsible person who believes in the system. Unfortunately, the system isn't holding right now. We're not in normal times, and the pain is here one way or another. So, well, I appreciate you having me on.
Governor, thank you so
Enjoyable.
much for being. Thank you for
so much,
coming
man.
to
Good luck
Ohio
with the-
overall.
Yeah.
And just thanks for being with us.
We want to have you back.
All right.
Maybe we'll play Madden again.
All right.
You know what I mean?
What, like to show them how ridiculous I am? Now
A redemption
A redemption game.
Now I got this bird in my saddle
Sorry.
to go find out what the heck happened.
Terrible, you didn't even know. You didn't even know. Brad brought it up. Well,
all right, thank you all.
Thank you.
Good to see you
Appreciate
both.
you,
Yeah, best of luck.
Appreciate you, man.